Okay, we're about to start the tour at the Elimna Castle.
So join the gentleman standing.
Okay. So this is another slave trade castle. We've just entered. As soon as you come in, you see the male slave dungeon. You know the males were the main ones.
When were you born? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay.
So this is the female dungeon we're entering. You see the bars. You see in here. The cell where they held the women who resist being raped. They usually put them in a cell to make an example.
Yes, so this is where we are going to start a tour. And all the rooms that you see here were dungeons for the female slaves. And the female captives, they were about 400, and then the male captives were about 600. So at one time, this castle held approximately 1,000 slaves at one time. Now, this is a cannonball they used to punish the female slaves. There were 8 of such balls here, that's why there's a hole on top of it. When the Europeans came, only the men were here without their wives. There were soldiers here, missionaries, merchants, governor, and even the governor's assistants. So some of them were raping the women. So those who refused to be raped, those who tried to escape, some of them were very strong, and then they were fighting the masters. They were brought here, and it would be chained to the leg. And then the person stands here, whether there is rain or sunshine. That period, no food, no water. So I think for the women, punishment came in the form of public humiliation. When they see that you are very weak, and then you'll be released. They did that just to break the spirit of the rest of the women down. So anytime you are called to do something, quickly you have to obey. So that is the purpose of this punishment. Let's continue.
Oh my God. Filthy in here. People leave flowers.
Yeah, so this is also one of the dungeons for the female slaves. But look at this. These are wooden bars. At that time, they used these ones. Original bars. So no one will get a chance to escape. But because the castle is very close to the sea, the original ones are getting rusty. So all the bars have been replaced with wood. So wherever you see wood like this, they were using this ones. Now, when you look on the floor, the clothes that you see, these are not the original ones. There was a program here. It was held on 3rd July 2015. And the title for the program is The Return of the Slaves. That's the title. So many people came here. Some from America, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Togo. So they were all Africans. They slept in this dungeon for one night, just to have a feel of how the slaves felt when they were in the dungeon. So this is what they used to cover themselves. And even we left here very late. The next day when we came, security told us that after the program, some of them fell sick and they were rushed to the hospital. So you can picture how hard it was when the real thing was going on in the dungeons. Any question?
So
Now,
for how long were the women slaves kept here?
all the slaves stayed in the dungeons for 3 months.
3 months.
Now, upon all these things that they were doing, some of them were Christians. So in this castle, there are 2 churches. The Portuguese came first. They built their own church over there. Now the church is a museum after the
2 churches here.
Portuguese were Catholics. So they built Roman Catholic Church. When Dutch took over from them in 1637, Dutch were not Catholics, they were Protestants. So they didn't use the Portuguese church as their own, and rather they built their own church, ironically, on top of this dungeon. So they were worshiping God up. Human beings were down, always crying for help. You call it Dutch Reformed Church or Protestant Church. So we have 2 churches here. Now, when the Portuguese came, they brought these bricks. Wherever you see the red bricks, these are all imported ones from Portugal. They came first. And I told you they spent 155 years here. Dutch took over from them in 1637. They also brought the yellow ones. Look at this one. Yeah. So they also spent 235 years here. And so when the Portuguese were here, it wasn't as big as this. Water reservoir, we still have water inside. They connected pipes like this one right on top of the building, and whenever it rains, it passes through. The water was filtered over there, and clean one will be harvested here. This one covers the entire floor. We are all standing on it. And when it is full, we have 20,000 gallons of water for domestic use only. Look at this place. They said anytime the governor of the castle wants to rape one of the women, this is where he will stand. And some of the women will be assembled as a yard.
When the
And the
governor wanted to
governor
rape
chooses the
them.
one he likes from this angle.
My God.
They have to fetch water for the one chosen by the governor to wash down. Maybe the person might have been in the dungeon for so long without taking a bath. And after the humiliation, they have to force her to climb this salon. They will force the woman to climb this straight to the governor's bedroom. And after the rape, the woman still comes back as a slave. And because of what happened, they said a lot of them got pregnant. And those who were found pregnant were free, because no one will buy a pregnant slave. But the captives were not from Ghana alone. Some from Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Togo, Mali, Burkina Faso. Ghana was like a hub. Apart from Ghana, there's a castle in Senegal. It's an island, so we call it Goree Island. Yeah, Goree Island. Even when you go to Mombasa in Kenya, there's a fort there called Fort Jesus. When you go to Nigeria, we have Badagry Slave Market. The same Nigeria, we have Calabar Slave Market. Yeah, Calabar Slave Market. Even Ghana, apart from the fort and the castle, a lot of slave markets. When you go to the north, you have a Salaga Slave Market, you have Pinkolo Slave Market, you have Paga Slave Camp here in Ghana. So they were from long distance. That's why when they were freed, some of them could not trace their origin. And when they gave birth, the children were light-skinned, so they saw the children to be their own. And later, they built houses outside the castle for the pregnant women. They brought those children here, and those children were educated. They were no slaves. Right. And according to the history, those children felt superior over the indigenous people. That is why today in Ghana, it is common to hear names like Vanderboy, Van Dyke, Viela, Dihir, Da Costa, Johnson, Blanson, Texan, and then the rest of the names. All are assemblies. In those days, we were using the tribal names. So they came in and they introduced all these names.
Did they leave the kids here, or did they take them back to you?
They took them back, yeah.
Okay.
And then they facilitated slaves.
Say that again?
I said they poisoned their mind.
Okay.
So they also grew up and they aided their slave trade.
They taught their children the trade.
We still have that going on.
Yes. Reverse racism.
No. We have those that are siding with the other side against us, their own people.
Right.
Still going on.
We're still on the female side of the dungeon.
Now, among the dungeons for the female slaves, this one is the largest. All the dungeons here, this is the largest one. And because this one is the largest, they said 150 women were here. 150 female slaves. There was a door at the side closed. Another door over there. Ventilation was from this one, and the small one that you see at the end. This is the original floor. Look, human beings were sleeping on the bed floor. And also for the slaves, there were no toilet facilities for them. Because when they built the castle, the initial idea was trading goods. So they were using all the rooms on the ground floor as warehouses. Now, when they shifted to slave trade, the same warehouses were converted into dungeons. Now, they have to put containers in the dungeons for the slaves to ease themselves. Imagine those who were very weak and could not get closer to the containers. There were women, they had their menses, they were in the same condition. And a lot of them died. And when you die, they will carry the body, they throw it into the sea. But when you go to the Elimna Township, there's a cemetery we call Dutch Cemetery. It is still there. Dutch were burying their own people there, but the slaves were thrown into the sea. So there's a tour here known as Elimna Walking Tour. They will take you to the town, they will show you the historical buildings, Dutch Cemetery, and so many other shrines. Any question? Let's continue.
So do they provide clothes for the women?
No, they were half naked.
He asked if they had clothes for them. He said they were half naked.
So, sir, as all this was going on, did Ghana not have...
All the female slaves who survived through the brutalities there, they were all back in chains and they were forced through this one. And when you get down, there is a door we call the door of no return. So the big ships were ready to take them away. And these iron bars you see were not there. Later they placed the bars to make sure nobody falls down. And also there were stairs. Today the stairs have been destroyed and there is a drainage system constructed. So we are going to see the door of no return. All the rooms on the ground floor around the side were dungeons for the male slaves. All the rooms around. The male slaves were about 600, as I said. The female slaves were about 400. So in total, about 1,000 slaves. The governor of the castle was up there. He was on top of everybody. He was up there. The middle one for the assistant governor. And the rest of the rooms were for soldiers. We have missionaries and this side for the merchant. Soldiers, the missionaries, and also the merchants. Now, this is the church. This is the first Christian church they built in this country. The reddish bricks. The Portuguese brought the red bricks. They were Catholics. When Dutch took over, I told you they were not Catholics, so they divided the
First church in the
into two.
country, built
And
by
they used
slave
the
masters.
ground floor as their auctioning hall. Upper floor, junior soldiers' mess, and they built their own church, ironically, on top of the female venue. So we have two churches. And British came, they used the same church as classroom block. That time slave trade was over. Today it's a museum. So after the tour, you still want to go to the museum and then read, it's self-guided. You can just go in there.
It's a museum now.
Now, the slanted wall that you see over there, you have a similar one on the side. Look at the similar one this way. Dutch added them to support the walls of the castle when they took over from the Portuguese. Now, when British also bought this castle, they also added the iron rails on top of it. They have similar one over there. British used this castle as police training school in 1948. So policemen were climbing up and down for training or exercise. And when you look on top of you can see we have two watchtowers. Have you seen the towers? Yeah, Dutch soldiers were up to look on the sea for any possible attack when they were here. Now, when British took over, they converted the towers into prisons. So British captured a very powerful Ghanaian king from Ashanti region. The name of the king is Prempeh the First. Full name is Nana Akwesi Agyeman Prempeh. The king was here for 4 years. From here, he was sent to Freetown in Sierra Leone for 1 year. And later the king was exiled to Seychelles Island across the Indian Ocean. He came back in 1924 through negotiations and then died later on, 1896, 1924. And the same British also captured a queen mother. The name is Nana Ya Asantua, a woman, very brave woman. She led people to fight the British. The woman was captured by the British. She was also imprisoned in this one for a year, and she was also exiled to Seychelles Island. And they did all these things to them because they all resisted British rule. That's what they did.
So we're going into the male slave dungeon. So we're going into the male slave dungeon right here, where the males were kept. And the door of no return. See, there's no windows in here.
Now, this is one of the male slave dungeons. And then the floor has been tempered with this, not the original one. When you look back there, the small room that you see, that was where they kept branded irons. The male slaves were branded. The branded irons have the initials on top. So we have initials like ITA, International Trading Association. We have some like JSS, John Smith Slave. So they put that side in fire very, very hot. When removed to touch either your chest, your arms, or your back. So the marks will be there for easy identification. That was when they did it. And they said a lot of them died out of the shock of the hot iron.
Oh my God.
Now, please, you have to mind your head. There is one step down. Watch your head and a step down.
One step down.
One step down.
See, it's very dark in here.
Yeah, step down. So the women were here. They came down this way. I told you there were steps at that time. today the stairs have been destroyed. And the men also came through the side. So I think this was a place that many of the captives saw themselves the first time they were brought to the dungeons. At that time, a whole family could have been captured. And when they were brought here, they separated all of them. So husbands and wives saw themselves here, brothers and sisters, and I think even friends. They were all in chains. And I strongly believe that some of them will be crying. And in chains, they were forced through this, and that is where we have the door of no return. This side, you have to bow very low, count 5 steps. After the steps, you can raise up your head.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my God.
I'm sorry, everyone.
All the slaves were forced through this one.
The door of no return is here.
The sea was very close. Today it has receded. So there was a ladder down. Small canoes took them right from this side to the big ships and off to America or Caribbean for plantations. And according to the history, those who died at sea were more than those who died in the dungeons because of how they were packed in the ship. And even when slave trade was going on, there was somebody around. He was a captain of a slave ship. The name of the man is John Newton. He gave an example that when a ship takes 700 slaves, either 1/3 or half died. When he died straight into the sea. But surprisingly, the captain of the slave ship later became a priest. Yeah, and he wrote this song. Do you know this song? Amazing Grace. Yeah, Amazing Grace, that is his song. He was actively involved during that time, and later he regretted and repented. Then he became a priest and he wrote that powerful song, Amazing Grace. And because a lot of them died, visitors lay wreaths at the corners of the floor. So then the African Americans and those from Caribbean to remember those who died in the dungeons, as well as those who also died at sea. And you can see some Chanel bottles. You see, when people come here and then they see churches grow in that during that time, they don't believe in the churches. They don't believe in the scriptures. So they are traditional religious believers. Some of the African Americans, those from Caribbean and even the Africans, they come here, they use alcohol to call their ancestors for protection and also prosperity. That's what you can see. Bottles there. Any question? Now, what we've been hearing is that before the coming of the Europeans, the Africans or our people were practicing slavery. But what they were doing was totally different from what the Europeans introduced. So like in those days, when you owe somebody and you are not able to settle the debt, you allow one of your children to go there, to stay with them, to work for it. And it was very difficult to identify a servant and a master because of the treatment given. And sometimes if the debt is settled, the person chooses to stay there. Tell the biological parents that I am okay here, I don't want to come back to you. And if it is royal family, the person is also entitled to become a royal. And sometimes the original ones will wipe out and it will be left with that person. The person will want to ascend the throne, and sometimes there will be small controversy that this one came and joined us, and we say, or you don't community. Because they say, or you don't quite, yeah, money in there, they say slaves or servants, so we don't want to, so that is so totally different from what's there.